This is Remote Daily, your daily dose of inspiration.
Welcome everyone to Remote Daily. I'm Felix, and I have the honor to host you today for a topic: what happens to your digital life when you die? Our guest today founded his own startup, Good Trust, and co-authored his second book, Digital Legacy: Take Control of Your Online Afterlife, which was published in the pandemic year of 2020. Please welcome with a round of virtual applause. So good to have you, Daniel Sieberg. Hi, Daniel.
Felix, what a pleasure, and thank you for the introduction. It's great to be with you in this virtual way. And I should say I'm a co-founder of Good Trust, and I believe our founder and CEO is listening in, so I wanted to give him a shout out, Rickard Sieberg, and we've got a phenomenal team who works on all of this. And so, of course, when you build any company, any startup, you need those people who are there to persevere through the ups and downs and figure everything out together. And so I wanted to give a shout out to all of them. So I'm here to represent the team, if you will. And the company, I would say, you mentioned that Remote Daily sort of was born out of the pandemic. I would say that Good Trust was also born out of the pandemic for a couple of reasons. One, Rickard's father died right around the time that we were thinking about Good Trust, and it really brought forward these thoughts of death and dying and what happens to our digital stuff after we die. But also a good friend of Rickard's in Sweden, his widow asked Rickard to help recover some of the videos and photos and his email. After he had died, his widow reached out to Rickard to find all of this right at the start of the pandemic. And he had died. There were many people in all of our lives who were dying and being affected by the pandemic. So there was just this kind of a series of events that kind of came together and got us thinking about this. And the company itself was born in sort of a remote way, if you will. Many of us didn't get to see each other in person until we'd already started working on the company. So it's something you don't stop thinking about. Once you get this kind of idea in your head about digital afterlife, I find it's something that takes root, and you start to kind of have to find ways to not think about it. Have a healthy relationship with living and dying, which is, I think, a good thing, ultimately.
As a polite Canadian in New York City, as a dual citizen, when you go to a dinner party, which now start to happen again, and you politely explain to people what you're doing for a living, how is the percentage of folks that sort of walk away compared to people that love engaging with you and want to know more? Like, what is the sort of what are the proportions in reactions?
It's about 50-50. And then, I mean, sometimes it's a bit of both. I think with any of this, there's like that creepy and cool kind of a factor, right? And so on the one hand, you get people who are sort of a bit mystified and pause, and they think, wait, what does happen to all of my digital stuff when I die? Or what they kind of give it a moment, and then there are people who just have a kind of a difficult time wrapping their head around the whole sort of concept. But then there are people who want to jump right in and sort of think, oh my gosh, I need to take care of this. What is going to happen? And maybe hadn't given it any thought before that moment. So yeah, I do love opening those conversations.
What do you even say when somebody asks, hey, so what do you do for a living?
Well, it's a tough one to answer, Felix, because as you know, my life has taken a few twists and turns over the last number of decades. But I would say that and sometimes I think when you're working on a startup, you have all sorts of different titles that apply, right? I mean, I think
you're a slasher, right?
Yeah, slasher, and I think broadly speaking, sort of like chief bottle washer, chief pencil sharpener, right? Some days I feel like a mechanic on an aircraft carrier, right? Just running around looking for things that might need fixing, and you have a flashlight and a clipboard, and you're just like, okay, let's take care of this, But I think in terms of how do I see myself, some days I feel like a sort of like a storyteller on the frontier, I guess, is sort of the way I'd like to look at myself, I suppose. and just the idea of
Mhm.
I in Canada, my Canadian roots include being a Pathfinder scout, so sort of the equivalent of an Eagle Scout. So I always love the idea of that, the notion of a scout, somebody who's kind of, looking ahead or thinking about what's important and kind of reporting that back to the people who they're
It's
part of this
fascinating.
community, right?
Mhm.
And so in that way, I do it with technology. But
Beautiful.
so I would love for people to think about, if I were to ask any of you where I would find the story of you, where would I go? How would I find the story of you?
Online or
Online, which I
online.
think, exactly. And in my experience, Facebook comes up a lot. LinkedIn, interesting, right? The sort of difference between professional maybe and your personal story, if you will. I mean, I guess a couple things I would say. One is wherever you imagine your story is, how do you imagine passing that on to people? And how
Mm.
important is that for you to preserve that? And what do you want to have happen to it? And the second thing is, if you have maybe a difficult time thinking about, where that is, or does it feel complete? Does it feel authentic? Is it really me? Does it have everything I ever wanted to share with people? If this was my last moment on Earth, if you will, what would I want to kind of capture? And do any of these really reflect that? And if not,
Mhm.
if not, then sort of how do you rectify that? And it's we as a company, we think a lot about this idea of kind of two ways to approach your digital legacy. One is quite pragmatic, maybe preserving those accounts, thinking about different settings that you need to take care of. Who do you want to nominate to do that on your behalf? Getting access to content, all of these things, closing down subscriptions to try, to get rid of recurring costs that might happen after somebody dies. Yeah.
Okay, that's actually something I wanted to like just have you maybe educate us on, because a lot
Yeah.
of what we saw here is the big tech, right? Facebook and Instagram both owned by Meta, LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. So what do they actually do when someone passes? What is actually the usual MO?
hmm
Is
Well, the
if there
usual,
even is
yeah.
one for these big tech companies?
Well, that's just it. I think the usual MO is that they don't really do anything unless you have taken steps to create some reason for them to reach out to you. So, for example, Google has something called Inactive Account Manager, which most people probably have never heard of before. But if you go into your Google account and search for Inactive Account Manager, you can say to Google, if I do nothing with my Gmail or any of my Google accounts over a set period of time, let's say it's 3 months or 6 months or however long it is, send me a note, an email. And if I don't respond or don't do anything, then maybe I'm not okay. And I'm going to nominate somebody who can sort of take action on my behalf. This is the broad term for this is called a dead man switch. Okay. So it used to be that, like in a train,
Charming.
if somebody, right, so if a train conductor wasn't there to
Okay.
keep the throttle going on the train and they released it, right, then the train would
Oh,
stop. So it's kind of a preventative measure, but it's really the only
got it.
way that a lot of these companies know that anything's happened to you, unless you contact them on behalf of somebody who has died, right? So and in that case, one of the things we needed to do early on was understand the processes required for any tech company, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google, you name it. What do they need in order for you to get access to somebody's account on behalf of that person who's died? A death certificate, a power of attorney, all of these
Hmm.
things. And so that was part of the challenge for us early on, was just kind of understand the whole landscape, if you will, and then create an experience for people to do that through our platform.
And Eileen just mentioned that what usually happens on Facebook, because she says my deceased friends remain there because no one has their passwords, right? That's what probably usually happens right now.
That is often what happens. The reality is that we would estimate that close to 30,000 people a day are dying on Facebook. When you think of the number of people who have accounts and sort of the mortality rate of the human population. So this is an issue, is only growing in scale and size every day. And it's awful to get these, birthday reminders from people who have died. It's really not it's something that these companies need to continue to think about, in our opinion. And we want to offer kind of the most secure and easy ways for people to do that, or for us to help to do it on somebody's behalf.
Wow. So that brings us, of course, to you. You shared with us before that in the prep, there was about 150,000 people who have used GoodTrust to manage their digital legacy in some way. So
yeah.
What are the first steps people take with you? Like, how do you actually go about helping them erasing, editing, or preparing their story?
Yeah, it's a bit of everything.
Story.
I heard this term recently, Felix. So this term of phygital, so a combination of the physical world and the digital world, right? The phygital. So the reality is that we all have stuff we care about in a digital way, probably, and in the real world, if you will, right? So a little more than a year ago, we added the opportunity for people to create a traditional will online to take care of those physical assets, your home, to create guardianship for your children, all of those things that any of us need to think about at a certain point in life, to take care of: an advanced healthcare directive, a durable financial power of attorney, even a pet directive. We offer a way to help to take care of your pets if something happens to you. So kind of those like key core documents that you need to create, along with this idea of digital legacy. How do you want to decide what happens to your digital life, and how do you want to be remembered? And then we have some really interesting ways to kind of reimagine memories. You can upload photos to our site, and we can animate them so that they kind of create almost like a new memory from an old one, and share those with people. So there are sort of different ways to think about why someone comes to begin their journey with us. And very soon, and I'm going to kind of I know this is a bit of an announcement, but within the next couple of weeks, we're going to offer people the chance to protect their digital life with Password Manager, to get cyber insurance for identity theft, a VPN. So kind of like everything you need to protect what matters is kind of what we think about. And that includes your memories, your children, your family. This is this hybrid world that you were just alluding to as well, of the digital and the real, so to speak. And so how do we do that effectively? The phygital. Yeah.
So, and what about you? Like you were a journalist, which means you have been very active on Twitter for an extended amount of time. You have a lot of followers there. So just as an example, and I'm sure you have your things settled as the co-founder, at least I assume so. What is going to happen to your Twitter when you're not there anymore?
So I don't have anything in Twitter that I feel that strongly about in sort of an emotional way. So I would like my Twitter page to ultimately be shut down or deleted, if you will. I don't think that it provides that much value to the world. There are instances with Twitter where somebody dies and the Twitter account continues. So Herman Cain, if folks remember, he was I believe he was running for president at a certain point and was a high-profile Republican political figure. After he died, his Twitter account kept going, and people were quite confused as to what was happening. But his team had gained access, and his family, to his account, and continued to kind of post in the way that they imagined he would. And then they changed it a bit to kind of make it clear to people that no, Herman Cain had not come back from the dead, and he was not, posting in the afterlife. But this was happening in his verified account. I don't want anybody to ever, do that with my Twitter again. I don't need that to happen. So, and I think it'd be fine if it went away. On the other hand, I do have a lot of really, I think, important photos in a personal way in somewhere like Facebook, my Google Photos, right? So I've set up people who can have access to all of that, and ensure that, that they can get it without too much trouble. Ideally, there's some friction with all of this. It's not as seamless as you might think, in order to take care of somebody's digital legacy. But I think it's going to continue to get easier and just more important. And then all of that together starts to tell the story of who you are, with your memories.
Can you share maybe the trickiest or one of the trickiest situations you have had since you started GoodTrust?
Well, I would say one comes to mind recently. So we had a woman who came to us and said that her brother had died recently, and that her brother had a good trust account, and that he had stored his will within our. So we also offer a digital vault. So the idea that you can you can upload and create this really centralized place of the most important documents in your life, and make it and ensure that somebody can find them. So you can designate what we call a trusted contact or a legacy contact. You have all of those documents that you've created, your will, these different directives, maybe it's certain photos that matter to you, whatever it is. It's like a treasure chest of the stuff that you really want to pass on to people in a digital way. And so she knew that he had a good trust account and that his will was there. But when she was reaching out to us in a sort of a customer support way, at the time, we didn't have the death certificate. We didn't have a way of verifying that, that she was actually his brother. I believe she wasn't listed as his trusted contact. So this is why we're always encouraging people to sort of complete their profile, if you will, so that it helps us to take action on behalf of any of these people. And we're super careful with all of this. I mean, of course, there are a ton of ethical and legal considerations in this entire space that we could spend hours talking about. So we want to adhere to all of that on behalf of families or others. But that's just one example. But yeah, you just never know.
And it makes me kind of laugh because death is something it's so hard for many of us in many situations to talk about it. But when I hear it from you, it's a lot of bureaucracy, and that is the part of that you can sort of like have a little bit of control over, I guess it sounds like. And you're getting more and more to the phygital to offer like a 360-degree caretaking of this, which includes the digital, which probably no one else does. However, at least I thought so. You told us before in the prep for today's call that you see competitors now. You have been ahead of your time again, as you were before in your previous career. You have now actually seen competitors pop up left and right over the last few months. So, and also there is this famous moment that went viral, Kanye as a holographic birthday gift to his now ex, Kim Kardashian. So there's also a pop cultural moment that is somewhat capturing this. How big of an industry do you expect this to become? Just numbers.
Numbers, I mean, I would expect it to be in the, I'm going to say single digit billions, sort of, for and getting into double digits pretty soon, because what we're talking about is a whole spectrum of reasons that people are thinking about digital afterlife. There's on the one end, there's this kind of practical, pragmatic, take care of your accounts, create your estate plans, kind of everything you do in a digital sense to protect yourself, digital security, right through to what you were just describing on this idea of representing yourself or somebody else as an interactive AI hologram, and I think and so much in between. And we have seen competitors popping up even over the last 2.5 years or so. Some people came a little before us, of course. Some will come after. And I think we're all in this space of trying to offer something that feels secure. It feels trusted. I mean, we like to say that trust is in our name, good trust. So we need to live up to that, but also fairly easy for people to do, that removes some of that friction, that it doesn't turn into this bureaucratic nightmare, and that it starts to feel like something you really care about, that you're creating, you're almost, I mean, this is where it gets a little sci-fi, but you're creating this digital version of yourself to pass on that feels meaningful. And gosh, I mean, in the book that Rickard and I co-authored called Digital Legacy, we get into this notion that human beings, for as far back as human beings have existed, have wanted to preserve their stories, right? The idea that cave drawings or just writing it down wherever you could find and passing that on, right? And this is innately in all of us, that we want to pass this on. We've heard from palliative care people who say that people on their deathbed, their last sort of dying wish is just to be remembered. My maternal grandmother died of Alzheimer's complications, and I remember what that was like when she forgot who I was. And I think that pushed me into this whole career of thinking about this intersection of technology and storytelling, and can they somehow kind of work together and coexist? And here we are at this inflection point where we're a global society, if you will. We're all connected. We spend multiple hours a day online. There's no going back from all of this. So how do we navigate it in a way that feels valuable and meaningful, respectful? You know, there are so many considerations in this beyond the financial and the monetary, of course, which is a for-profit company. We need to think about our own sustainability in this. But this is a huge issue. It doesn't matter where you live. You probably have an internet connection at the very least, and very likely a smartphone, or you're creating all of these memories and stories. So how do we tackle that at scale? To me, this is only becoming a bigger and bigger issue to take on.
And Karis was just sharing in a chat, that she really wished she had this, or her sister had it, because there was just no access for anyone in the family. So this, it's such a pressing thing. And I was just, when you talked about being remembered, I once heard that you die 3 times, if physically, and then in the memories of people, and then your DNA way later, so what disappears. But maybe we have to add like a 4th to that says maybe never. And you pointed us to a very interesting video on YouTube that shows a moment that I would like to share with all of you. I found it gut-wrenching, and I still have a hard time watching it, but this is a virtual reality reunion between a mother and her daughter who had passed, done, I think, in South Korea by the wish of the mother. Is there anything we should basically look for in this video, Daniel, before I screen share it?
I mean, a couple of things. When you referenced when Kanye West gave to Kim Kardashian the hologram of her father, Robert Kardashian, and she was emotional in that moment. But of course, her father was older than her, and when parents pass away, it's sad and tragic and emotional for all kinds of reasons. But they're older, and they're, of course, they're expected to die before their children, even if it's tragic when the children are younger and the parents die. In this case, it's the opposite, is what I'm getting at. This is a mother reuniting with her child, which is never what any parent wants to imagine or think about, which is part of the reason I think it's so hard, Felix, for you and I and any parent, or anybody, frankly, but to watch this, because it triggers the most sort of awful thought that you could lose your child ahead of you. And so I guess that's just to preface this by saying that it is a little challenging to watch and think about what this mother is experiencing. But she volunteered to do this, and it's pretty powerful.
나연이 잘 있었어? 엄마 나연이 보고 싶었어. 나연아.
So I'm gonna go and stop here at this moment. I guess what makes this so hard for me to watch is her voice, the mother's voice, and the fact that they cut the video in a way that you saw her embracing her, and then they cut to the green screen and you see she's not really there. And I think that's what really got to me now when I watch it the 2nd or 3rd time. What do you make of this video? Like, you are dealing with this, as you said in the beginning, you think about this day and night. It's become your life's mission in a way. What do you make of this?
I appreciate the Zen moments like the one that Karis created earlier as often as possible, because I think if you spend too much time thinking about death and dying, you can, just curl up in a ball on the floor. I mean, I was getting emotional just watching it. I've seen that video many times. I mean, it's, I think, and there are grief experts and counselors who know far more than I do and we do about all of this, and they might look at this and say, well, is that healthy for a mom to experience that or not? Should we be more finite with how we imagine somebody leaving our lives and move on, and or is this a path to healing in some ways, and a way to calm any of those emotions that can overtake us in a state of grief? I'm not sure I have I know I don't have all the answers, but I think this is only going to become more immersive in many ways. That was a VR experience, but there are now ways that you might imagine, what if you could ask a photo hanging in your home of a person about the memories you had with them, right? And so in that way, yes, there's an emotional, maybe a sadness there, but also some amount of happiness, right? They could recall some of the good times. We're coming into Father's Day. There's a great, I'm going to call out one of our, it's not really a competitor so much, but a company called Hereafter. And the founder of that company before his father died, created a conversational AI experience with his dad that he called DadBot. So here we are heading into Father's Day. It's kind of a neat idea to think about the fact that he can ask his dad about memories and sort of talk to him in the afterlife, if you will. So there's a whole, this is being represented in popular culture. And I think that's often, we see movies in Hollywood or celebrities. The money kind of comes into something like this, and it illustrates it in a way that triggers our imagination, and then businesses and the sort of practical side of it follows. And so I think that's kind of the wave that we're in with the idea of digital afterlife.
Well, Anne put in the chat, she doesn't think it's healthy if she was there as the mom would just want to stay and live in this virtual world. And there's a huge discussion underneath this video. She had the link in the chat about that same thing. Like, is this healthy or not? The mom is on air in the video saying afterwards, having sort of recuperated, that she was very happy to have this experience. But you just said, and Eileen is actually saying, it could create a sort of like closure moment. So this is a discussion that's just starting. And you just said this is just evolving now that we're moving into Web3. Many more of these opportunities will come up. When it's time for, I was just pointing towards when it's time for both of us to like statistically, right, to go. What do you think this is going to look like in a few decades from now?
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any sort of image you can paint for us?
I feel like something like what we just watched will be less unusual. It will be something that people can perhaps choose to have. Maybe it's something that you select when you're deciding some of your end of life plans. How would I like to be remembered as a hologram? Where am I choosing to get all of those memories from? Is it verified by me or not? And of course, I mean, I think the important thing to point out with all of this is that this is becoming a choice that we need to make. And if people don't decide now how they want to be remembered, what are the ways that you want to preserve your real life assets, your digital stuff, your memories, everything. If you don't do that now, even when you're younger, right? Don't wait until decades from now to start thinking about all this stuff, because we know that, of course, the worst or the unimaginable could happen at any time. But to kind of curate your life in this way now, then when you get to a stage where you are older and you can kind of reflect back on some of this, not only have you got this peace of mind that you've done this, but you've now got this wonderful cachet of memories. You can say to people, here is my life, right? This question we ask people about, where is my story? You are now become more of the author in your story by taking ownership of this, deciding what should happen to it, and feeling like you have some control over that. Because I mean, that's the title of our book, is Digital Legacy, Take Control of Your Online Afterlife. I think what we want to encourage people to do is to not do nothing, to do something about this. Otherwise, the end result is that people could do something with your digital life or your memories in ways that you don't want to have happen. And how we view it, how we view the Kim Kardashian example or this Korean mom, I think it has so much to do with our own point of view. If it was our own child, if we were that person, maybe we would feel like the mom did and feel this sense of happiness and joy even in a temporal way to reunite with their daughter. For us as observers and witnesses, we have some amount of, well, I don't know, or I would rather do that, or is that such a good idea? I totally get it, but that's the thing. We're not her. And until we are that person, or we're in the middle of that, we're going to have this kind of creepy, cool reaction to all of this stuff.
So maybe to close us off here, there is so much to be discussed about this, and I think you're really a pioneer, and you're putting yourself out there, and there's so many tough conversations that I envision you to have with customers and with people that come to you that are not that, just like the sister you described, where you then don't know, is this real, like what is really going on? But that's because you're putting yourself, as you said in the beginning, on the frontiers of storytelling. But help us, like normal Joes who are not there yet. Like, if I want to start today and take the first steps to taking control, like, where do I even begin? Because the breadcrumbs, Sabine said in the beginning, the Wayback Machine is there for all of us. The breadcrumbs are already everywhere. Like, it feels like we already lost control a long time ago. When that friend of ours posted an image somewhere, you know, that shows us at a party and didn't ask. So how do I even start?
If I could do a little bit of a sales pitch for Good Trust, I would say, you know, we have a basic plan that's free at mygoodtrust.com. So people can sign up there and at least start to understand. We try to make it as straightforward as possible, but to understand how to take control of your digital legacy, how to prepare your estate plans, how to be protected and secured online. We kind of walk people through it as much as possible. And then I would say, start to also look into, you know, and within the book, and, you know, I don't want to sell the book too hard here, but we ask people to really lay out what is it that means something to you within your digital life, right? Do a little bit of an audit and think about, you know, what matters and why, because I think it's easy to forget where we have all of that stuff. You were mentioning those photos of you that you might not, you know, approve of or find a little bit embarrassing. I think I still have a MySpace profile, for example, right? Like, what is all the stuff out there that we have, the breadcrumbs, right? There's a lot of them at this point. And so I think, you know, sometimes it's important to just do that, or with your partner, with your spouse, with whoever, to kind of say to them, hey, just so you know, like, this stuff, I don't really care about this. I don't mind if it's deleted and it's gone. Or, you know, here's a list of passwords that I'm going to give you because I trust you, and I want to make sure you can access these. We make that possible in the digital vault, by the way. Of course, we don't encourage people to share passwords unless you know exactly, you know, the person you're giving them to and all the rest of it for security reasons. But we want to remove the heartache from all of this, I think is part of the issue, right? Because in the absence of all this, it could be horribly sad and tragic. And we have seen these instances too. I think you were referencing one where families are kind of locked out.
Right.
They're left behind. They don't know what to do. And I think a lot of people with this issue right now, I'm going to say there's kind of like suffering in silence because they don't know where to turn. And you try to go to a bigger company or a place that has your data and something you care about, it's really hard to kind of start that conversation.
So we have two questions here in the chat. One is about your platform specifically. One is intercultural. I'm going to start with the platform question. How do you ensure that your security sort of, you know, that the trust is actually there for a good reason? Like Eileen is asking, is there greater security with you, with Good Trust, than with other platforms? Like, how do you explain that?
I would say it is as high a level of security as people can imagine anywhere on the internet. And this is something we take incredibly seriously. We have a phenomenal CTO, also one of the co-founders, Marcus. And this is something that we look at and take incredibly seriously, because we know that this is one of the reasons that people will either choose to do business with us or not. And so we need to adhere to that. And so we're constantly thinking about the ways that we need to take care of people's data. And we do lay it out in quite specific terms on the site if people want to learn about our security and encryption levels and all of that. We get into it in more detail. So certainly we know that that's important for people and want to take care of that.
So as much security as possible on the internet means that you probably encrypt things. You have you're sort of like separated from, you know, the usual file sharing sources, and you try to you try to really be cautious about this, because I envision this to be probably the biggest challenge in building your business, is to secure that, to get that trust, right? And
Absolutely.
I wanted to point to Sabine's question, available for non-North Americans, because it made me think about the different cultures that are out there. You said 18,000 people are dying on Facebook every day from all over the world, and every culture has a different approach to death. So are you catering mainly to do you have a main demographic? Is it like the Western white demographic, or how do you build other geographics, other cultures into your offerings?
I mean, I would say we want to be a global business. A lot of our investors come from Google, our early investors, our angel investors. We have a portfolio of investors who are now part of our seed round, who think about this as a global challenge, a global issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I would say that, mostly right now we focus a lot of our marketing efforts and so on in the United States and Canada, in some parts of Europe, a lot of English speaking countries. But what we have seen, for example, just this week, we had this crazy trend where one of the features that we have are these animated photos, and we have the ability to create a singing photo if you want to, just add a little fun to your photo in a memorable way. And this trend took off in Spain and in other Spanish speaking countries. And we had this like 20 to 50x spike in people who are coming to our service now, mostly for that one feature. But I think the reality is this speaks to how people are kind of seeing this all over the world. And so, yeah, absolutely want to address this in as many ways as possible.
Can I just specify my question? Would that be okay? I was wondering if you'd ever run into any problems with the kinds of documents that you've been given by customers, so that maybe platforms wouldn't accept any kinds of, whatever, death certificates, etc.
Not as yet, but it's a great question, because this is something, that these tech companies need to think about too, right? And so we're learning as they, need to figure out the legal processes wherever you are. And the same is true of the legal documents that we're allowing people to create. So like a will, for example, one that you create in the United States is not, we need to make adjustments to that for it to be legally valid in the United Kingdom or something like that, right? But yeah, we don't have any stories of any issue at that on that specifically, but these are all things that we're going to have to figure out as we go forward.
Wow. Thank you, Sabine, for being here. And I can't believe we're at the end of the hour already, Daniel. This has been such an mind-blowing conversation, and we learned so much from you. We always pass the mic back to our guests at the end. How can we support you?
Wow, I would say, by taking care of those you love, and get started with just these kinds of ways to protect your future. 2/3 of Americans don't have a will. I mean, I feel like this should be like a rallying cry as like a social issue. And for so many years, it's been an impediment for people with cost and legal issues and whether they should do it or not. And we've tried to simplify it and make it super secure. So just as like a thing, there are too many people out there who don't have one, and their families are met with this, what do we do now, confusion. So if I can, impart that as like something people can do to support their families, I guess that's my one little parting thought. But yeah, and have a great weekend and happy Father's Day, Felix.
Thank you. Likewise.
To all the fathers out there.
And thank you so much for being our guest, Daniel. I hope you come back and share more with us. Your journey is going to continue and only get bigger and greater and more important. So thank you for sharing that. It was great seeing you. I'm Felix. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you, everyone.
This is Remo Daily.